Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtike. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Yena Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha Sri Caitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirviseshasha Shanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Manchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna.
So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, Chapter 1. We are on text 35. So, Vid Anye Cha Nijatma Devam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charu Deshna Gada Gadaya Swasti Charanti Soumya. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O Sober One, others such as Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama, who accept Lord Sri Krishna as the soul of the self and thus follow his path without deviation, are they well? So Vidur is continuing to ask Uddhav about all these different personalities who are associates of Lord Krishna. Text 36. Api svadorbhyam vijayachyat achyutabhyam dharmena dharma paripati setu duryodhano atapyata sat shabhayam samrajya lakshmya vijayanuvritya. Let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhishthir is now maintaining the kingdom according to religious principles and with respect for the path of religion. Formerly, Duryodhan was burning with envy because Yudhishthir was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjun as if they were his own arms. Maharaj Yudhishthir was the emblem of religion. When he was ruling his kingdom with the help of Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the opulence of his kingdom surpassed all imaginations of the opulence of the kingdom of heaven. Because Yudhishthir was so righteous, he was really a great king. He was fit to be the emperor of the world because he knew how to take care of everyone. That's a qualification of being a ruler, a leader. They should have the capability of taking care of everyone. And so that's why at that time, the earth was giving so much fruits, vegetables, grains, and proficient. The cows were happy. They were giving so much milk that the milk would be overflowing from the others. You know, the rivers, the lakes, they were always full with lotus flowers. There were ample rains. And there was, because Yudhishthir Maharaj had no enemy, the people were very peaceful, and they were very happily doing their duties and also at the same time cultivating their Krishna consciousness. His actual arms were Lord Krishna and Arjuna, and thus he surpassed everyone's opulence. Duryodhana, being envious of this opulence, planned so many schemes to put Yudhishthir into difficulty. And at last, the battle of Kurukshetra was brought about. After the battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthir was again able to rule his legitimate kingdom, and he reinstated the principles of honor and respect for religion. That is the beauty of a kingdom ruled by a pious king like Maharaj Yudhishthir. So it was just Duryodhana's envy. He was just envious. He was not able to replicate what Maharaj Yudhishthir was doing. He was not able to act as Maharaj Yudhishthir was acting. If he was also able to take care of the citizens the way Maharaj Yudhishthir was doing, then even his kingdom would have been so nice and opulent, and people would have been happy. So he just saw the end result of what Maharaj Yudhishthir had, but he didn't want to see how Maharaj Yudhishthir got that result. So many times we are also like this, you know, we get envious of another person who has so many things that we admire or we want to have. But then we don't see how they are acting, what efforts are they putting. You know, how am I different from that person? How can I learn from that person actually, so that even I can achieve the same satisfaction or the same opulence? So, text 37. Kim va kritageshva agam atyamarshi bhimo ahivadirghatam vyamunchad yasyangiri patam ranabhurna sehe margam gadayas charato vichitram. Please tell me whether the unconquerable Bhima, who is like a cobra, has released his long-cherished anger upon the sinners. The field of battle could not tolerate even the wonderful playing of his club when he stepped on the path. Vidur knew the strength of Bhim. Whenever Bhima was on the battlefield, his steps on the path and the wonderful playing of his club were unbearable for the enemy. Powerful Bhima did not take steps against the sons of Dhritarashtra for a long time. Vidur's inquiry was whether he had yet released his anger, which was like that of a suffering cobra. When a cobra releases its venom after long cherished anger, its victim cannot survive. So all the time, Yudhishthir Maharaj had to pacify Bhim. It's okay, don't get so angry, don't get so angry. But of course, Bhim's nature was that, he couldn't bear all these insults that was happening. So Vidur knew that one day all this anger which is there in his heart is going to burst out. Text 38. Kachid Yashoda Rathayutthapanam Gandhi Vadavo Paratir Aste Alakshito Yakchara Kuta Kudho Maya Kirato Girishas Tutosha. Please tell me whether Arjun, whose bow bears the name Gandiva and who is always famous amongst the chariot warriors for vanquishing his enemies, is doing well. He once satisfied Lord Shiva by covering him with arrows when Shiva came as an unidentified false hunter. Lord Shiva tested Arjuna's strength by picking a quarrel with him over a hunted boar. He confronted Arjuna in the false dress of a hunter, and Arjuna covered him with arrows until Lord Shiva was satisfied with Arjuna's fighting. He offered Arjuna the Pashupati weapon and blessed him. Here, Vidur inquired about the great warrior's well-being. So this was the time when, I think, when the Pandavas were in exile, and then Lord Krishna was in fact encouraging Arjuna to get all the weapons from the various demigods. And so there was this pastime where Arjuna defeated even Lord Shiva in battle. So how great a bowman was Arjuna, you know. Text 39. Yamav utasvit tanayo prithaya parthe vrito pakshmabhir akshiniva remata udyam ridesva riktam parat suparnav iva vajri vaktrat. Are the twin brothers who are protected by their brothers doing well? Just as the eye is always protected by the eyelid, they are protected by the sons of Pritha, who snatched back their rightful kingdom from the hands of their enemy Duryodhan, just as Garuda snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra, the thunderbolt carrier. Indra, the king of heaven, carries a thunderbolt in his hand and is very strong. Yet Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, was able to snatch nectar from his mouth. Similarly, Duryodhan was as strong as the king of heaven, and still the sons of Pritha, the Pandavas, were able to snatch away their kingdom from Duryodhan. Both Garuda and Parthas are pet devotees of the Lord, and thus it was possible for them to face such strong enemies. So here, Vidur is saying that there was a time when it seems that Garuda took away the nectar from the mouth of Indra. Indra is very powerful. He's ruling the whole heavens. So he's very qualified, very powerful person. And Duryodhan also was very strong. He amassed such a great army. So in strength-wise, Indra and Duryodhan are very, very strong. But Garuda and the Pandavas, they're pure devotees of the Lord. So it doesn't mean that only if you're strong that you can win over anyone, but because they are the devotees of the Lord, they were able to overcome such great, powerful enemies. You know, because Krishna protects his devotees. He sees that my devotee needs my protection. He always protects. Avishya Rakshive Krishna. So we should have that firm faith. If I become a good devotee of Krishna, Krishna will protect me. Vidur's inquiry was about the youngest brothers of the Pandavas, namely Nakul and Sahadev. These twin brothers were sons of Madri, the stepmother of the other Pandavas. But although they were stepbrothers, because Kunti took charge of them after the departure of Madri with her husband Maharaj Pandu, Nakul and Sahadev were as good as the other three Pandavas, namely Yudhishthir, Bhim, and Arjuna. The five brothers are known in the world as regular brothers. The three elder Pandavas took care of the younger brothers, just as the eyelid takes care of the eye. Vidur was anxious to know whether, after winning back their own kingdom from the hands of Duryodhan, the younger brothers were still living happily under the care of the elder brothers. It's a nice analogy here that Vidur is saying, that how the eyes are protected by the eyelids. You know, so he's saying Nakul and Sahadev living happily under the protection of Pandavas. It's a very nice analogy. So text 40. Aho prathape driyate rabhakarte rajar sivaryena vinapitena yastva ekaviro adhiratho vikjaye dhanur dvitiya kakubhas chatar chatshraha. O my Lord, is Pratha still living? She lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to live without King Pandu, who was the greatest commander and who alone conquered the four directions simply with the help of a second bow. A faithful wife cannot live without her lord, the husband, and therefore all widows used to voluntarily embrace the burning fire which consumed the dead husband. This system was very common in India because all the wives were chaste and faithful to their husbands. So this is the system of sati. Later on, with the advent of the age of Kali, the wives gradually began to be less adherent to their husbands, and the voluntary embrace of the fire by the widows became a thing of the past. Very recently, the system was abolished since the voluntary system had become a forcible social custom. So before, it was not that the wives were forced to enter in the fire. They were voluntarily because they didn't want to live without the husband. There was so much attachment that the wife would think that this fire which is burning is less miserable than the fire of separation. But when the sati system became a force, forcing the women to enter into fire, it's illegal then, it's unlawful. And then rightfully it was abolished. When Maharaj Pandu died, both his wives, namely Kunti and Madri, were prepared to embrace the fire. But Madri requested Kunti to live for the sake of the younger children, the five Pandavas. This was agreed upon by Kunti at the added request of Vyasadeva. In spite of a great bereavement, Kunti decided to live not to enjoy life in the absence of her husband, but only to give protection to the children. This incident is referred to here by Vidura because he knew all the facts about his sister-in-law Kunti Devi. It is understood that Maharaj Pandu was a great warrior and that he alone, with the help of bow and arrow, could conquer the world's four directions. In the absence of such a husband, it was almost impossible for Kunti to live on even as a widow, but she had to do it for the sake of the five children. So Kunti's sacrifice was even greater than Madri because she accepted the fire of separation from her husband just to take care of the children. And we know that her life was not an easy one. She was always, the five Pandavas were being under the attack of Dhritarashtra, and so she was so emotionally, she was always under so much anxiety. Any questions, comments, or anything to share at this point?
No, all very, very clear.
So we'll continue reading. Text 41. Shaumya tam adaha patantam Ratre paretaya vidudruhe yaha Niryapito yena suhrit swapurya Aham swaputran samanu pratena. O gentle one, I simply lament for him, Dhritarashtra, who rebelled against his brother after death. By him, I was driven out of my own house, although I am his sincere well-wisher, because he accepted the line of action adopted by his own sons. Vidur did not ask about the welfare of his elder brother because there was no chance of his well-being, only news of his gliding down to hell. So we can see, Vidur is saying, he's not asking, how is my brother Dhritarashtra? He's saying, I'm lamenting for my brother Dhritarashtra. Because he knew what's the use I'll ask about Dhritarashtra. I know his condition wouldn't be good. Vidur was a sincere well-wisher of Dhritarashtra, and he had a thought about him in the corner of his heart. He lamented that Dhritarashtra could rebel against the sons of his dead brother Pandu, and that he could drive him, Vidura, out of his own house on the dictation of his crooked sons. So we can see how Dhritarashtra, he was blind not only physically, but spiritually. He was taking the side of Duryodhan and his sons who were actually not righteous. They were all doing illicit things, sinful activities, aggression. They were aggressors to the Pandavas, and yet Dhritarashtra was always siding them. And Vidur really cared for Dhritarashtra, and yet Dhritarashtra drove him out of the house. In spite of these actions, Vidur never became an enemy of Dhritarashtra, but continued to be his well-wisher. And at the last stage of Dhritarashtra's life, it was Vidura only who proved to be his real friend. Such is the behavior of a Vaishnava like Vidur. He desires all good, even for his enemies. So Vidur did not act out of false ego. He didn't say that, oh, because Duryodhan was so, he insulted me with such lies, and then Dhritarashtra also drove me out. He never said anything. Vidur didn't have a false ego and say, no, I'm not going to help Dhritarashtra. In fact, he was caring about Dhritarashtra still, and he went to give good advice to Dhritarashtra. And that is how a devotee is. A devotee does not care about his personal insults, but he's always caring to do benefit for others. How would we act if we were insulted, if we were driven out like that? How would we act? Would we still wish good for the other person, or would we come under the clutches of anger and false ego? That's for us to think. So, text 42. Soham Hare Martya Vidambanena Drisho Nirnam Chalayato Vidhatuhu Nanyopalakshya Padavim Prasadak Charamsi Pashyan Gatavish Mayo Atra. I am not astonished at this, having traveled all over the world without being seen by others. The activities of the personality of Godhead, which are like those of a man in this mortal world, are bewildering to others. But I know of his greatness by his grace, and thus I am happy in all respects. Although he was the brother of Dhritarashtra, Vidur was completely different. By the grace of Lord Krishna, he was not foolish like his brother, and thus his brother's association could not influence him. Dhritarashtra and his materialistic sons wanted to falsely lord it over the world by dint of their own strength. The Lord encouraged them in this, and thus they became more and more bewildered. So we can see that it's not necessary that if we are in a family or in the association of non-devotees, that we can't become devotees. No, because there is nothing material that can stop devotional service. Devotional service is the matter of the heart. It's our relationship between ourselves and Krishna. Nothing material can stop it. Nothing can come in the way. So, but Vidur wanted to achieve sincere devotional service of the Lord, and therefore became a soul absolutely surrendered to the absolute personality of Godhead. He could realize this in the progress of his pilgrim's journey, and thus he was freed from all doubts. He was not at all sorry to be bereft of his hearth and home, because he now had experienced that dependence on the mercy of the Lord is a greater freedom than so-called freedom at home. So the devotees, because they are fully dependent on the Lord, So they don't have the fear. And then because they don't have fear, then they are free. We have so much fear. We want to hold on to our possessions. We want to have the comforts. And so we are fearful because we have experienced that anytime the situation may change, anytime our comfortable position may change, anytime our possessions may be taken away. So that and we are dependent on these things. And because we are dependent on these things, we are fearful that they'll be snatched away. But what does a pure devotee do? He's just dependent on the mercy of the Lord. A person should not be in the renounced order of life unless he's firmly convinced of being protected by the Lord. This stage of life is explained in Bhagavad Gita as Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhihi. Every living entity is factually completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. But unless one is in the pure state of existence, he cannot be established in this position. So actually, each and every one of us is dependent on the Lord. But we don't believe it. And because we don't believe it, we pretend that we are the controllers. But deep down, we know we can't control anything. And that's why we have so much anxiety and fear. But the more we engage in Krishna consciousness, the more we will be able to realize our position that, oh, I'm actually really dependent on the Lord. There's nothing that I can control. I can't even control my own digestion. I can't control the sun and the moon, the direction. I can't control the circumstances. You know, what is there is under our control. The only control that we have is our independent free will. What do we choose? Do we choose Krishna or do we choose to be away from Krishna? That's the only thing that we have. That's the only independence. But in our stage right now, we are thinking, oh, I'm independent. I'm not dependent on anyone. But a pure devotee, because he's so pure, he can understand things as they are. He's very humble and he's very honest to recognize the things as they factually are. So because we are not humble, we are not honest, we don't want to accept this fact that we are actually dependent on Krishna. The stage of dependence is called Sattva Samshuddhihi, or purification of one's existence. The result of such purification is exhibited in fearlessness. A devotee of the Lord, who is called Narayana Para, is never afraid of anything because he is always aware of the fact that the Lord protects him in all circumstances. So a pure devotee has full faith that Krishna has always protected me. He is protecting me and he will continue to protect me. So why should I fear? This is how a pure devotee thinks. And a conditioned soul, he thinks that I'm depending on my own strength and my own ability. And because we know that we are actually not very strong, that's just on, outside we like to show that, yes, I can do it. I'm very strong. I have great ability. But then that's why we are always so fearful, always so anxious. With this conviction, Vidur traveled alone and he was not seen or recognized by any friend or foe. Thus, he enjoyed freedom of life without obligation to the many duties of the world. So we can also become fearless. The more we depend on Krishna, the more we have faith on Krishna, Krishna will surely protect me. We do not have to leave the house and go like Vidur did. No, we don't have to change our external position. We continue to do our duties wherever we are. But we start depending more and more on Krishna. And the moment we start chanting Hare Krishna, the moment we start hearing from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, we are to that degree, we are accepting that, yes, I am depending on Krishna. I am dependent on Krishna. So when Lord Sri Krishna was personally present in the mortal world in his eternal blissful form of Shyam Sundar, Those who were not pure devotees of the Lord could not recognize him or know his glories. Avajananti mam muda manushim tanum ashritam. Bhagavad Gita 9.11. He's always bewildering to the non-devotees, but he is always seen by the devotees by dint of their pure devotional service to him. So many people say they want to see God. When Shyam Sundar Krishna, when he was on this earth, so many people could see him, but not everyone could recognize that he's the Supreme Lord, that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But only the devotees could recognize him. So if somebody tells us, show me God, where is God? Then we can tell them, you first become a devotee, you will see God. You chant Hare Krishna, you will see God. Yeah. So we have to learn to depend on Krishna. The more we depend on Krishna, the more our anxiety and fear will be less. Any questions or comments? Or anything to share?
Clear.
Like how everybody was depending on Krishna in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
Is it like how they loved him and they were depending on no problem, Krishna will take care. Like how even if something happened, they were all dependent on him.
Yeah. So actually each of us are fully dependent on Krishna. There are some who are the pure devotees, they recognize that they are dependent on Krishna. And then there are some like us who are in the material world who don't want to accept that we are dependent on Krishna.
Recording in progress.
Oh.
Because we don't want to recognize that we are here.
Mm.
The more we can accept that, yes, actually what's in my control, I am dependent on Krishna. I can't even create a seed. So if I'm hungry, the food that is being provided to me is by Krishna. That's how dependent I am on him. I'm dependent on him to even digest my food. But we don't want to accept these things. We don't want to accept that we are dependent on Krishna. But the more we get purified, the more we chant Hare Krishna, the more we hear and read about Krishna, then to that degree, we will be able to see, oh yes, I am actually dependent on Krishna. And the Brajvasis, of course, they are pure devotees, so they are totally dependent on Krishna, totally. Each of us is, because that's what the Kathopanishad says that, right? Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. That amongst all the eternal souls, there's one eternal who's maintaining all the other eternals. We are all being maintained by Krishna. We are actually all dependent on him. But because we don't want to accept it, we are here. And we feel fearful and we feel anxiety.
So does it mean it all comes down to surrendering, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we just have to become a little honest, become a little honest with ourselves. And then when we, in honesty, will try to see, oh, what is actually my capability? What am I actually doing in this material world? What am I doing in my position? I might think, oh, this thing happened because of me, but I have repeated this action many times, and many times the result is different. How come? How is that so? So who is the controller actually? Why, if everything I'm doing is the same, why the result became different? So means I'm not the controller then. So yes, the more we start becoming honest, then the more we can surrender. And the surrendering process starts when we start chanting Hare Krishna. That's the way we start our surrendering process to Krishna. Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
So we
Yes, perfect.
today. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shilpa Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Radha Ashtami. It's a very, very special day. And devotees observe a half-day fast for tomorrow. And so maybe we can speak a little bit about Radharani tomorrow. So